She understood every single word they said. At a private dinner in Seoul's most exclusive district, the executives joked in Korean, assuming their black translator from Paris was just a decorative hire. But Amara Ndiaye had been fluent since childhood, and tonight, after the third racist comment, she decided to let them know. Amara was the secret weapon for this multi-billion-dollar merger, hired for her flawless French. But her employers, the Korean tech giant Hansung, had made one critical, arrogant mistake. They never asked what else she spoke. For 50 minutes, she translated their polished proposals while enduring their raw, unfiltered Korean commentary about her race, her appearance, and her presumed intellect. The question was no longer if she would break her professional silence, but how and what would be left of their deal when she did. To understand why Amara didn't walk out immediately, you have to understand what she walked into. 2 years earlier, she was in Dakar, running a small but successful translation firm she'd built from scratch. Then her mother in Paris was diagnosed. The medical bills were a tidal wave. The contract from Hansung Group's external recruitment agency was a life raft. A 6-month gig as a senior translator in Seoul, pay in euros, enough to keep the clinic doors open. She took it, leaving her business in her sister's hands. Hansung was a fortress of old money and new tech. Founded in the 70s, it was now a sprawling conglomerate led by the young, ambitious chairman Park Min-jun. His play was the acquisition of Leclerc et Cie, a century-old French luxury goods maker. It was a prestige move, a bid to inject European heritage into Hansung's brand. The deal was fragile, sensitive. Every word in the negotiation mattered. That's why they needed Amara. First week was a masterclass in invisible labor. She was brilliant, parsing dense legal and technical jargon between Korean and French with effortless precision, and she was ignored. To the executives, she was a utility, a voice-activated tool. They praised her French output to the French delegates, then dismissed her in Korean the moment those delegates left the room. "Get the machine another coffee," one vice president joked after a long session. They called her the asset and the module. Never Amara. But the real education came from the women in the office. Jae-yoon, a junior assistant, pulled her aside one afternoon. "They think you only understand what they pay you to understand," she said quietly, her eyes on the floor. "It's not malice, it's a blind spot, a very deep one." Another secretary, Ms. Cho, was blunter. "You are two things to them, a black woman, which they don't know how to place, and a French speaker, which they need. They have put you in a very small box. They will forget you are also a person listening from inside it." Amara began to file it all away. The offhand comments about her braided hair being interesting. The assumption she needed the metro system explained to her, as if she hadn't navigated Paris, Dakar, and Brussels. The way Park Min-jun himself would look through her, his eyes on the French CEO while she spoke, as if the words originated from the air beside her. The pressure on Park was immense. The Leclerc deal was his brainchild, opposed by a faction of old guard board members who thought it was a vanity project. Failure would weaken his authority. Success would cement his legacy. Every dinner, every negotiation was a high-wire act. This final dinner at the opulent Park Hyatt was the capstone. The terms were 99% settled. Tonight was about rapport, about sealing the cultural partnership with wine and handshakes. Amara wore the emerald green dress. Armor, she told herself. She prepared her glossaries, reviewed the latest term sheets. She was the conduit for billions of euros. And as the executives gathered in the private room, swirling glasses of Bordeaux, the Korean chatter began to flow freely around her, a river of assumed privacy. It started small, Director Kim nodding at her as she set up her notepad. "At least she's aesthetically pleasing, better than that old professor we used in Lion." Laughter. Vice President Lee sighed. "Let's just hope she's more competent than she looks. These African-French mixes can be unpredictable." The word he used, kohonhia, hung in the air, mixed blood, a clinical, dehumanizing term. Amara's pen hovered over her paper. She took a slow breath, the one she used for simultaneous interpretation. In, out, translate. The French delegation arrived. She slipped into her role, her voice calm, her face a mask of professional neutrality. For the first hour, she was perfect. The French were charmed by her Parisian accent. The Koreans were pleased with her efficiency. Then Chairman Park made a joke in Korean about the French CEO's stubbornness, a playful jab about Gaulish pride. The table chuckled. The French delegates looked to Amara. She translated the joke into a mild, flattering comment about strong leadership. The room smiled, and as she delivered the translation, Vice President Lee leaned to Director Kim and said, just loud enough, "See, no depth. She just moves words from one side to the other. A pretty parrot." Something cold and sharp settled in Amara's chest. This wasn't ignorance, it was contempt. She continued, course after course, translating compliments about cuisine while digesting insults about her competence. The vice president wondered aloud if her contract included jungle vaccinations. Director Kim speculated, with a smirk, that her French was probably learned from some colonial leftover, not from the Sorbonne, where she had indeed graduated top of her class. She saw Jae-yoon serving dishes catch her eye for a fractured second. There was a warning there and a shame. Amara looked down at her hands. They were steady, but inside the calculus was shifting. This was more than bias. This was the entire architecture of her professionalism being used as a shield for their prejudice. They were banking on her silence, on her need for the job, on her very skill as a translator to enable their ridicule. The dinner was nearing its end. The French CEO stood to give a final, gracious toast. As Amara translated his words of partnership and mutual respect, Chairman Park leaned back, satisfied, and said to his table in Korean, "Well, we're almost done. We can send the decoration home and go have a real drink." The French CEO finished. The room looked to Chairman Park for his closing response. He stood, smiling, glass in hand. He opened his mouth to address his French guests. And Amara Ndiaye, her notepad closed, her hands folded on the table, made a decision that would shatter the room. The silence that followed wasn't the quiet of a finished meeting. It was the vacuum after an explosion. Chairman Park stood frozen, his glass halfway to a toast that would now never be delivered. His smile had melted into a mask of pure, undiluted shock. At the Korean end of the table, every face had drained of color. Director Kim looked as if he'd been physically struck. Vice President Lee simply stared, his mouth slightly agape, processing the impossible fact that the pretty parrot had just quoted his own words back to him in flawless, icy Korean. Amara did not look at them. She kept her eyes on Chairman Park, her expression composed, almost serene. The years of training held. Her voice had been calm, clear, and utterly devoid of the tremor she felt in her ribs. She had not shouted. She had not even raised her voice. She had simply switched channels from the French they paid for to the Korean they took for granted. The French delegates glanced between Amara and the stunned Koreans, confused by the seismic shift in the room's energy. The CEO, Monsieur Leclerc, leaned toward Amara. "Is everything all right?" he asked in French. Before she could respond, Chairman Park found his voice. It was strained, a thin wire of sound. "Monsieur Leclerc," he said in accented French, "please excuse us for one moment, a small internal matter." He gestured sharply to his executives, a silent command to follow him, and strode out of the dining room toward the private lounge without a backward glance. The Korean men scrambled to their feet, chairs scraping loudly, and filed out after him, avoiding Amara's gaze as if it were a physical hazard. Amara was left alone with the bewildered French delegation and the silent, wide-eyed serving staff. Jae-yoon, hovering by the door, caught Amara's eye. There was no smile now, only a look of sheer, terrified awe. Monsieur Leclerc turned fully to Amara. "What just happened, Mademoiselle Ndiaye?" Amara took a slow breath. The professional part of her brain, the one that was paid to facilitate understanding, engaged. Chairman Park made a remark in Korean, Monsieur Leclerc, that was not intended for translation. I felt it necessary to clarify the context by repeating it aloud. It pertained to my role here. I have inadvertently caused an interruption. My apologies. Leclerc, a man in his 60s with sharp eyes that had seen decades of boardroom politics, studied her. He did not look offended. He looked intensely interested. "A remark about your role," he repeated, "and by repeating it, you have sent the entire Korean negotiation team into a panic. This is not a small internal matter." He sipped his wine, thinking, they underestimated you, a fatal error in any negotiation. In the private lounge, chaos of a quieter, more deadly kind had erupted. Chairman Park stood with his back to his men, staring out at the Seoul skyline. "How?" he asked, the single word cracking like a whip. Vice President Lee was the first to splutter. "Sir, there is no way she could be fluent. The agency file said French and English. This is deliberate deception." "Deception?" Park turned, his face a cold mask of fury. "She is a translator. She listened, she learned. While you were making jokes about jungles and parrots, she was building a complete understanding of every stupid, arrogant word coming out of your mouths. For weeks." He slammed a hand on the lacquered table. "You have spent this entire negotiation showing our worst, most provincial selves to the one person bridging us to our partners. And you did it because you were too lazy to ask a single question." Director Kim, pale, tried a different tack. "The deal, she will sabotage the deal now. She will tell the French everything." Park let out a harsh, mirthless laugh. "She already has, you fool. By not translating your insults, she has been protecting the deal. By staying silent, she has been acting with more professionalism and strategic sense than all of you combined. And what was your contribution? To call her a decoration within her earshot at the final dinner." He paced, running a hand through his hair. The weight of it all settled on him. His legacy project, now balanced on the goodwill of a woman his team had systematically humiliated. "We have to contain this, immediately." But containment was already impossible. Back in the dining room, Monsieur Leclerc had dismissed the rest of his team, asking for a private word with Amara. When they were alone, he gestured for her to sit. "Tell me the truth," he said, not unkindly. "What did he call you?" Amara felt the last of her professional armor begin to crack. The adrenaline was receding, leaving a hollow, shaking fatigue. He said they could send the decoration home and go for a real drink. Leclerc's eyebrows rose. "I see, and the others, throughout the negotiations." She gave him a curated list: the pretty parrot, the unpredictable mix, the jungle vaccinations. She presented them without emotion as data points. Leclerc listened, his face growing stern. "This is not acceptable," he said finally. "Not as a man and certainly not as a partner. This deal is not just about factories and distribution rights. It is about building a shared house. I cannot build a house with men who show such a face to their own colleagues." He paused. "You have extraordinary restraint, mademoiselle, and extraordinary skill. To learn a language to that level of comprehension in secret, this is not just talent. This is formidable intelligence." He stood. "I am returning to my hotel. I will await Chairman Park's contact, but my position has changed. The terms are no longer 99% settled. They are now under review." He gave her a small, respectful nod. "You should leave. This is no longer your burden to carry." Amara gathered her things on autopilot: the elegant notepad, the expensive pen provided by Hansung. As she stepped out of the dining room, Jae-yoon was waiting in the hall, clutching a serving tray like a shield. "Unnie," she whispered, using the familiar term for an older sister. "The service elevator, quickly. The press is already in the lobby." Someone from a business outlet saw them storm out. News traveled at the speed of shame in Seoul's corporate world. Amara rode down to the basement, her mind racing. What now? The contract was shattered. The money for her mother's treatments was gone. The life raft had sprung a leak of her own making. Her phone buzzed in her clutch. A message from an unknown number. "Do not speak to anyone. A car will collect you at the North Service exit. It is for your safety. Kang Jin-ho, Kang Jin-ho." Chairman Park's notoriously discreet and powerful chief of staff, the man who made problems vanish. This was not an offer, it was an extraction. The black sedan was indeed waiting, engine purring. A stern-faced man in a sharp suit opened the door for her. She hesitated, looking back at the glowing hotel, then slid inside. The car did not take her to her small apartment in Mapo-gu. It drove upward, into the affluent, quiet streets of Hanam-dong, pulling into the underground garage of a sleek, modern residence tower. Kang Jin-ho himself was waiting by a private elevator. "Miss Ndiaye," he said with a short bow. "Chairman Park wishes to speak with you. He is awaiting you in the penthouse. Please understand, the alternative was a swarm of reporters at your door by morning." She was ushered into a minimalist living room with a breathtaking, silent view of the Han River. Chairman Park stood by the window, having changed out of his dinner suit into a simple black sweater. He looked younger and utterly exhausted. "Miss Ndiaye," he began, turning to her, "please sit." "I would prefer to stand." He acknowledged this with a nod. What happened tonight was unacceptable. On behalf of Hansung Group, I offer my deepest apology. The words of my executives were ignorant, prejudiced, and profoundly unprofessional. They do not represent the values I am trying to build. Amara listened, saying nothing. It was a good corporate apology, carefully worded, completely expected. He continued, sensing her silence was not acquiescence. I have suspended Vice President Lee and Director Kim pending a full investigation. Their conduct will have consequences. And the deal? Amara asked, her voice quiet. Park's jaw tightened. Monsieur Leclerc has paused all discussions. He is re-evaluating the partnership in light of tonight's revelations. He cited a lack of trust in our corporate culture. He paused, choosing his next words with visible care. He also said that the only person in the room who demonstrated true integrity and strategic intelligence was you. Amara felt a flicker of something, not satisfaction, but a grim validation. Miss Ndiaye, Park said, taking a step closer. I need you to understand something. I did not hear those comments. I was focused on Leclerc on the deal. I'm not making excuses. I am stating a fact. My failure was one of leadership, of allowing an environment where that could happen around me unseen. That failure has cost my company billions, and it has cost you your dignity. For that, I am personally sorry. This was different. This was not the corporate script. This was raw damage assessment. What do you want from me, Chairman Park? Amara asked. You have me brought here in secret. You have suspended your men. You have apologized. What is the next play? He met her gaze. The next play is survival for both of us. The news will break tomorrow. Hansung executives humiliate Translator, sink deal. The board will call for my head. The old guard will use this to kill the Leclerc acquisition and my authority with it. My position is hanging by a thread. He took a breath. And you will be portrayed as either a vengeful provocateur or a helpless victim. Neither is true, and neither will help your career or your family. He had done his homework. He knew about her mother. I am offering you a partnership, Park said, the word hanging in the spacious room. Not as employee and chairman. As allies in managing a crisis we did not choose together, but must now face together. Amara's mind raced. What does that partnership entail? Tomorrow I will issue a public statement. It will name the misconduct. It will announce the suspensions and a third-party audit of our HR and ethics policies. It will be unequivocal, but it will also state that you and I have spoken at length, that you have accepted my personal apology, and that you have agreed to consult with Hansung on rebuilding a truly inclusive global strategy. He was offering her a shield and a sword, a chance to shape the narrative, to move from target to architect, but it came at a cost. Her cooperation would legitimize his recovery. And in return, she asked, in return, your contract is not terminated, it is transformed. You will be retained as a senior consultant on intercultural strategy at triple your current rate. Your mother's medical needs will be covered by the company's top-tier insurance plan retroactively, and you will have a direct line to me to ensure nothing like this ever happens again at Hansung. He paused. But you must decide tonight. By morning, the story will have a life of its own. It was a staggering offer. It addressed every practical fear, but it asked her to stand beside the man whose house had bred the poison in the first place, to trust his conversion was real and not just a desperate business calculation. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was her sister in Dakar, a string of frantic messages. Amara, reporters are calling the office here. They are asking about you, about Mama. What is happening? The crisis was already escaping the boardroom. It was knocking on her family's door. Chairman Park watched her read the messages, his face grim. They found them already, he said softly. This is what I am trying to contain, for you too. Amara looked from the phone, with her sister's panic frozen on the screen, to the powerful, cornered man waiting for her answer. The silence stretched, thin and sharp as a blade. And in that silence, from the hallway, came the clear, distinct sound of another elevator arriving. The elevator doors opened, and the controlled crisis in the penthouse became a war council. Stepping out were three people: the stern, elderly chairman of the Hansung board, Kim Byung-ho, the company's slick, aggressive head of communications, Choi Seung, and to Amara's shock, Vice President Lee. He was not suspended. He was suited up, wearing a look of wounded indignation. Board Chairman Kim ignored Amara entirely, addressing Park Min-jun as if she were a piece of furniture. Min-jun, we have been trying to reach you. We heard about the unfortunate incident. We have convened an emergency board committee. This matter requires a unified internal response. Park's posture changed, hardening. Unified with whom? Chairman Kim, the men who caused the incident. Vice President Lee stepped forward, his voice oozing false regret. Sir, with respect, there has been a terrible misunderstanding. Our comments were taken out of context. Private, after-work humor. This translator has clearly been gathering material. Who knows for how long? It is a breach of confidentiality and trust. He dared a glance at Amara, his eyes cold. She is not a victim. She is a corporate spy. The accusation hung in the air, absurd and dangerous. Amara felt the trap snap shut. They were rewriting the story already, and they had the power to make it stick. Head of Communications Choi Seung nodded, tapping his tablet. The initial data points are favorable for our narrative. She is a foreign contractor with no long-term loyalty to Hansung. She concealed a critical skill, which can be framed as deceit. The executive's comments, while regrettable, were made in a private, informal setting. We issue a statement expressing regret for any unintended offense, announce a sensitivity training initiative, and emphasize our full support for the executives who were, in fact, the targets of an unprofessional recording. Park stared at them, a muscle ticking in his jaw. You want me to throw her to the wolves, to call her a spy, to save their careers and let the deal die? Not at all, said Chairman Kim smoothly. We save the company from a scandal that would scare off all our international partners. We control the narrative. Then, in a few weeks, we quietly resume talks with Leclerc. He is a businessman. He will understand realpolitik. And what about real justice? Park's voice was low. This is business, Kim replied, his tone final. Not a courtroom. The board's directive is clear. We handle this internally with discipline and we protect our people. He finally looked at Amara, a dismissive flick of the eyes. Offer her a severance, a generous one, with a strong non-disclosure agreement. If she refuses, we release the spy narrative to the press first. Her career in Korea will be over. They had come not to manage the crisis, but to bury it, and to bury her with it. Amara spoke for the first time since they arrived, her voice cutting through the room's tension. I have recorded nothing. All eyes turned to her. Vice President Lee smirked. Of course you would say that. I have no need for recordings, she continued, locking eyes with Board Chairman Kim. I have a memory, a verbatim phonetic memory. It is called being a professional simultaneous interpreter. I can reconstruct every conversation from the last 8 weeks, in both languages, with 99% accuracy. The comments about jungle vaccinations were on October 12th, at 3:15 p.m. in Conference Room B, following a discussion on African supply chains. The pretty parrot remark was on November 3rd, at 7:50 p.m. in the hallway outside the main dining room. I can provide the context, the speakers, and the French translation I provided at the time, which deliberately omitted the insult. She took a step forward. You can call it spying. The rest of the world will call it evidence. And when I walk out of here, I will be contacting not just the press, but the French Embassy, the Korean Human Rights Commission, and every international business ethics watchdog I can find. You think this story is about a rude comment? I will make it a case study in systemic corporate racism. I will diagram it for them. Hansung will not be a company that had a scandal. It will become the textbook definition of one. The silence was absolute. Even Park looked at her with new eyes. She had not just understood the language, she had been mapping the entire toxic ecosystem. Choi Seung, the communications head, paled slightly. The board's plan relied on her being passive, frightened, or greedy. It could not withstand a precise, public counterattack from a witness with total recall. Board Chairman Kim's expression darkened. That would be a declaration of war, young lady. You would destroy yourself in the process. My family is already being harassed by your reporters, Amara fired back. My mother is ill. What exactly do you think I am protecting? She turned to Park. You offered me a partnership to manage a crisis. It seems the crisis is now your own board. Do you still want an ally, or do you want a sacrifice? It was a direct challenge. Park Min-jun looked from the old guard of his company, representing the corrupt, insulated way of doing business, to the brilliant, furious woman they had all underestimated. He saw his future in that moment, continuing to answer to these men or building something new that could actually survive in a global world. He made his choice. Chairman Kim, Park said, his voice now carrying the full, unquestionable authority of the CEO. You are correct. The board did convene an emergency committee. I am the chairman of that committee. My decision as CEO and committee chair is as follows. Vice President Lee and Director Kim are terminated, effective immediately, for gross misconduct and creating a hostile work environment. Their conduct will be detailed in our public statement. Head of Communications, Choi Seung, is removed from this case for suggesting a cover-up. You, Chairman Kim, will advise the board to support this action, or I will call an extraordinary general meeting of shareholders and present them with the full story, including the board's attempt to intimidate a whistleblower and perpetuate a corrupt culture. He wasn't just fighting the executives, he was firing his own head of comms and threatening the board chairman. It was a coup in reverse. Kim Byung-ho's face turned to stone. You are risking everything for a translator. No, Park corrected. I am saving everything because of a strategist. We are done here. Kang Jin-ho will see you out. The old guard left, defeated and seething. When the elevator doors closed, the penthouse felt different. The air was clear and charged with a new kind of peril. They had won the first battle, but they had just declared civil war within Hansung. Park let out a long breath, running his hands over his face. They will fight back. They have allies, media contacts, shares. And we have the truth, Amara said, but the adrenaline was fading, replaced by a deep, trembling exhaustion. The high-stakes bravado had been a weapon, now she just felt hollow. Park seemed to sense it. You should rest. There is a guest suite here. It is secure, no reporters. You can call your sister. He gestured down a hallway. In the morning, we draft the statement together as partners. Amara didn't have the energy to argue. She was shown to a serene, minimalist room. She called her sister, reassured her, and then collapsed onto the bed, her emerald green dress feeling like a costume from another life. She slept a dead, dreamless sleep. The dawn brought not peace, but a new front in the war. Kang Jin-ho woke them at 6 a.m., his face grave. The board faction has leaked a version of events to the Chosun Ilbo. The headline is, Foreign Translator Accuses Hansung Executives of Racism, Deal with French Giant Collapses. It frames the story as your unverified accusations causing the deal to fail. The comments are vicious. They are questioning your motives, your background. It was the spy narrative, launched as a poison pill. The public and the shareholders would see Hansung as a victim of a foreign troublemaker. But then at 7 a.m., a second story broke. This one was in Le Monde, the French newspaper. It was an exclusive interview with Monsieur Leclerc. He was quoted at length. The competence and integrity shown by Mademoiselle Ndiaye were the only points of light in a disgraceful display, he said. We have paused the deal not because of her actions, but because of the culture they revealed. Hansung has a choice, evolve or become a relic. We will wait to see if Chairman Park Min-jun is truly the modernizer he claims to be. The international business world was now watching. The story was no longer a local scandal. It was a referendum on Korean corporate globalization. Park and Amara spent the morning in his study, crafting the response. She insisted on specificity, not just regrettable comments, but naming the insults. He insisted on accountability, the firings, the ethics audit, the commitment to change. They released the joint statement at noon. The internet erupted. The story went viral, but it split into two distinct narratives. In one, Amara was a heroic whistleblower, a symbol of dignity against corporate arrogance. Hashtags like I am not a decoration and Pretty Parrot trended globally. In the other, she was a manipulative opportunist who destroyed a billion-dollar deal and Korean jobs. The debate raged, but the one undeniable fact was that Hansung's stock price began to plummet. At 4 p.m., the call came that changed the game again. It was from the office of the mayor of Seoul. A major international forum on urban innovation was scheduled for the following month. The keynote speaker had just cancelled. Given the global conversation, the mayor's office wanted to know if Amara Ndiaye and Chairman Park Min-jun would consider giving a joint address on the topic of building truly global corporate cultures. It was an olive branch from the city and a stunning opportunity. It was also a trap, a public stage, live, unedited. One misstep from either of them would be catastrophic. Park looked at Amara across the desk. They want to see if this is real, if we are real. They want to see if we can stand together without a script. Amara looked out at the city, at the countless offices where similar conversations were likely happening in whispers. She thought of her mother, of the insurance Park had promised. She thought of every other decoration in every other boardroom. If we do this, she said, we don't just tell them we've changed, we show them what change looks like. Park nodded, then we show them. They accepted the invitation, and as the news of their upcoming speech spread, the board faction made its final, most brutal move. They released a confidential internal memo to the press. It was a financial projection from the now terminated Vice President Lee. It outlined the potential cost of the Leclerc deal's failure, including projected job losses at a Hansung subsidiary in a small Korean town. The attached media narrative was simple. Amara Ndiaye's pride had cost hundreds of hardworking Koreans their livelihoods. The story was no longer about corporate ethics. It was about national loyalty. The backlash was immediate and ugly. Protesters gathered outside Hansung headquarters, not supporting Amara, but blaming her. The pressure was no longer just on the company, but on her personally, to prove that her stand was worth the price real people were now being asked to pay. On the eve of the forum, Amara stood in the penthouse, watching the protesters on the news, their signs blurred but their anger clear. Kang Jin-ho entered quietly. There is a car ready to take you to the venue for rehearsal whenever you are. She didn't turn. Do you think they're right, that I should have just kept quiet? Kang Jin-ho was silent for a moment. I think, he said carefully, that a tree that bends too far in a storm never grows straight again. You stopped bending. Now we see if the tree can stand. The next morning, the auditorium was packed with 1,000 of the city's most powerful figures, executives, diplomats, media. The air was thick with anticipation and hostility. Backstage, Amara adjusted her simple, powerful black suit. Park Min-jun stood beside her in a dark gray one, looking uncharacteristically tense. Remember, he said quietly, we are not apologizing, we are presenting a new equation. The moderator announced them. The crowd's applause was polite, icy. They walked onto the stage together, into the blinding lights and the weight of 1,000 judgments. This was no longer a corporate dinner. This was the public square. And as Amara stepped up to the podium, looking out at the sea of skeptical faces, she knew that every word from this moment forward would be in a language everyone understood. Amara looked out at the frozen silence of the auditorium and began not with an apology, but with a question. How many of you, she said, her voice clear and carrying without a microphone's help, have ever been the only person like you in a room, the only woman, the only foreigner, the only one from a certain school or region or background? A ripple of uneasy recognition went through the crowd. She had bypassed the scandal and gone straight to the universal experience of difference. I was hired for my French, she continued, but I was assessed, judged, and categorized in Korean. The two were kept in separate boxes by my employers, the skill in one box, the person in another. This is not a story about me catching someone in a bad joke. It is a story about what happens when a company's idea of global talent is just a collection of useful boxes and not a recognition of whole human beings. She paused, letting the translation through the headsets catch up. Then she nodded to Chairman Park. He stepped to his podium. Hansung Group failed, I failed. We pursued a French company for its heritage, its elegance, its global brand, while allowing a mentality within our own walls that was the exact opposite of those values. We wanted the appearance of being a global player without doing the hard work of becoming a global community. That hypocrisy was exposed at a dinner. But it was built, brick by brick. in 1,000 smaller moments that I did not see because I was not looking. He didn't hide behind corporate jargon, he stated it as plain failure. The crowd listened, the earlier hostility softened by this stark admission. The easy narrative, Amara took over, is that I was a victim who fought back, or that I was a troublemaker who destroyed a deal. Both are fantasies. The reality is more boring and more important. I was a professional who was prevented from doing her best work because part of her energy was always spent navigating the invisible walls of assumption built around her. How much talent, in how many companies, is being wasted right now on that same navigation? She then did something extraordinary. She switched to Korean, but not the formal, textbook version she'd used at the dinner. She used the natural, conversational Korean she'd absorbed over weeks, complete with the subtle idioms and contractions of the boardroom. "You wondered if I was a spy," she said, and a few people actually flinched. "I was just listening. When you only expect to hear French from someone, you forget that ears don't have a language filter. My skill is not secrecy, it is attention. And for months, I paid more attention to your company than some of your own executives did." The shock in the room was palpable. This was the proof, live and undeniable. She wasn't just fluent, she was culturally literate. Chairman Park spoke again. "The Leclerc deal is not dead, it is on pause. Monsieur Leclerc was right to pause it. We are using this time not for damage control, but for demolition and rebuilding. We have terminated the executives involved. We have commissioned an external audit of our entire HR and promotion structure, and we have created a new position, reporting directly to me, Chief of Global Culture and Strategy, which Miss Ndiaye has agreed to fill." This was the news no one expected. The translator wasn't just being compensated, she was being elevated to a C-suite level position with direct power to change the system. Amara added, "My first project in that role will not be in Seoul. It will be here in Korea, in the town of Gwangju, where the Hansung subsidiary is facing layoffs due to the deal's uncertainty. We are not abandoning those workers. We are redirecting a portion of the intended acquisition investment to retrain that workforce for green energy manufacturing, a sector where Hansung is expanding. The jobs will change, but they will not disappear. Our responsibility is to our people, all of our people, not just to a deal." This was the answer to the board's most vicious attack. She had turned the job killer narrative on its head, presenting a concrete plan that addressed the very fears the old guard had exploited. The murmuring in the crowd turned from skeptical to interested. For the final part of their talk, they did not use podiums. They sat in 2 chairs at the center of the stage, and for 15 minutes, they took questions. The first few were softballs, then a senior journalist stood. "Chairman Park, isn't this just brilliant publicity? A dramatic scandal, a public redemption, a charismatic hire. How do we know this isn't all theater?" Park leaned forward. "You don't, not today. Judge us in 1 year. Look at our retention rates for foreign talent. Look at our promotion metrics for women. Look at the diversity of our next board slate. Watch what we build in Gwangju. The proof will not be in our speeches. It will be in our spreadsheets and our factory floors. We are giving you permission to watch and to judge." The answer was honest. It admitted there were no guarantees, only accountability. Another question for Amara. "Miss Ndiaye, you spoke of the burden of navigating invisible walls. Now you have immense visibility and power. Will that burden go away?" Amara smiled, a real tired smile. "No, the walls are still there. Now I have a sledgehammer and a blueprint, and a CEO who has promised to swing the sledgehammer with me. That is the difference." The forum ended with sustained, genuine applause. It wasn't a triumph. The stakes were too real for that, but it was a decisive turning of the tide. The media coverage that followed was split, but the dominant frame shifted from scandal to case study. In the weeks that followed, the mechanics of the new reality took shape. The external audit at Hansung uncovered systemic biases in recruitment and promotion that went far beyond the dinner comments. Park used the findings to push through sweeping reforms, leveraging the board's fear of continued shareholder revolt to get them passed. Vice President Lee and Director Kim filed wrongful termination lawsuits that quietly disappeared into arbitration. With settlements, that included strict non-disclosure agreements. Monsieur Leclerc, impressed by the forum speech and the actionable plan for Guangzhou, agreed to reopen negotiations. The deal was signed 3 months later, but with amended terms that included a joint cultural exchange fund co-managed by Amara's new department. Amara moved her mother to Seoul, into an apartment with a view and access to excellent medical care. Her sister took over the Dakar translation firm fully, with a steady stream of referral business from Hansung's new African partnerships. And then came the final, surprising detail. 6 months after the forum, a package arrived at Amara's office. It was from Jia-Yun, the junior assistant who had first warned her. Inside was a simple note and a USB drive. The note read, "You asked for proof of change, this is mine." On the drive was a recording of a team meeting in the strategy department. Jia-Yun, now a project manager, was clearly leading the discussion. At one point, a male colleague tried to talk over her. She stopped, looked at him, and said calmly, "I was speaking. My box is not the quiet Korean woman box. Please adjust your assumptions." The room went quiet, then the colleague apologized. The meeting continued. Amara played it for Park. He watched it twice. "She learned from you," he said. "No," Amara corrected softly. She just needed permission to be what she already was. The wall was already inside her. She just needed to see that it could fall. The story of the dinner became legend, distilled into a simple, powerful myth. But the real story was in the quieter, daily decisions it made possible. A junior assistant finding her voice, a town getting a new future, a company slowly, painfully, learning to see the people it had hired as whole. Amara Ndiaye had come to Seoul to be a bridge between languages. She stayed to become an architect of a different kind of space, one where the boxes remained empty and the people could finally, fully be seen. The story of that dinner is often told as a moment of spectacular revenge. A woman silencing her detractors with the very skill they ignored. But that's just the spark. The real story is what happens after the room goes quiet. It's the harder, slower, less cinematic work of building something new from the ashes of a broken assumption. Amara Ndiaye's journey highlights a silent tax paid by millions in workplaces worldwide. The cognitive load of navigating hidden biases, of code switching, of proving competence against a backdrop of low expectations. Her fluency in Korean was just the key that unlocked the door. Her real power was choosing to walk through it and demand the architecture on the other side be rebuilt. For Hansung and Chairman Park, the crisis became a costly but necessary mirror. It's one thing to issue a statement about diversity. It's another to rewire promotion algorithms, to invest in retraining rather than layoffs, to hand a sledgehammer to the person who found the weakest wall. True inclusion isn't about adding new boxes to an old system. It's about dismantling the box factory altogether. So what's the lingering question this story leaves us with? It's not whether someone will understand a hidden insult. It's this: in your own life, in your own workplace, what are you hearing that you're not meant to understand? And more importantly, what walls are you, perhaps without even realizing it, helping to keep standing? Change never begins with a grand speech in a packed auditorium. It begins in the quiet, unnoticed moments that come before. It begins with a decision to listen more closely than you're paid to see the whole person instead of just their utility, and to believe that the boxes we put each other in are flimsier than they look. If this story resonated with you, if it reminded you of a moment of your own quiet resilience or a wall you'd like to see fall, we'd love to hear about it in the comments below. Share your thoughts, your experiences. This conversation is how these stories move from being just tailies we watch to blueprints we can use. If you know someone who needs to hear this today, a friend navigating a tough workplace, a student feeling underestimated, anyone who needs a reminder of their own power, please share this with them. And if you want to join us for more deep dives into the human stories behind the headlines, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. Thank you for watching, for listening, and for being part of this community. We'll see you in the next story.